Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Here we are for episode 7. I have to say, I've totally loved the last 2 chapters that we've done on meditation. Well, I shouldn't say episode 7. We've done a lot of episodes, but chapter 7 is what I'm meaning. Welcome, Michael. Good to see you. And I think just straight over to you this week, and let's launch in.
Okay, Jacqui. Hello to you, and a big cheerio to all of our listeners. And I'm glad some of that enthusiasm from the last 2 podcasts on meditation is still in your mind, because, Jacqui, I'm still recovering from that beautiful aha moment that you had at the beginning of last week's podcast. It was it was an aha moment. I call them aha moments to gloss over a little bit, but they're really spiritual experiences. It was quite a profound spiritual experience you had in regards to the meditation being, you obviously connected with that, you understood it for a long time, but that deeper connection, that resonance, that true knowing of that's the link between joining the lower self, the mortal self, with the higher self. And I'll elaborate on that because it's in part of the chapter we're going into now. So I'll just make mention of that again. But listeners, those of you who have missed that, it's podcast 14, the last one on chapter 6 in meditation. And if you've missed it, I'd urge you very, very strongly to not only listen to it, because you'll miss a lot of the value of it, which you're really missing in some sense in these podcasts if you're merely listening to them. Like, huge benefit, of course, Jacqui, with listening, but obviously with visual, because that people can see our expressions, and you get a lot from that. It's like going to a film and closing your eyes and just listening. Even as a primary school teacher, it was drummed into us in our teacher training that to try and engage as many of the 5 senses with the students as you could. So not just relying on sight or not just relying on hearing, but combining. So in these podcasts, even though people are only seeing our faces, we have facial expressions, and if they don't, and it's very important in this example. I'm wanting people to make sure they watch, even if you're often just listening as you're driving and so on. Try and put aside just 10 minutes. It's at the start of the podcast, and you'll capture Jacqui's spontaneous response or the statement she made, and how you could see the joy in her face and so on. And also you'd see the joy in my face, because as a teacher, I love to see people having any of these experiences. All
And
right,
we
Jacqui?
should just clarify, because we come sometimes between the two of us number them differently, but we're talking about chapter 6, part 2, if you're looking for the actual episode.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you didn't catch it, listeners, I'm strongly suggesting you need to watch it the first 10 minutes to get the full impact, because it was very powerful. It was very special, very powerful, very special. You felt that, Jacqui? You said at the start, it was a special moment for you, so it carries
Absolutely.
over. Yeah.
I mean, I'm hoping we're not building this too much up for the listeners. It was a special moment for me, but I'm not sure if everyone will necessarily feel that aliveness in their system.
No,
but they might
that's...
enjoy the exchange between the two of us. You
Yes.
sharing, me having a moment, me sharing of the experience, that enlivening something in you. I think people are quite interested sometimes in that interplay of moments, even if it might not necessarily touch them in quite the same way.
Yeah, I understand that, Jacqui, and I wasn't meaning it from that sort of point of view. It's just that they're examples. They're sort of what encourages the seeker of truth when they hear, fellow people they know, people like us, because you can fall into a egoic trap that says, we can't do this. We're just humans. We can't know God or connect with God or become realized. And I'll be touching on that in today's podcast. Well, we can. And in your example, I'm not, wanting to build you up or make out, oh, Jacqui's famous and all the rest of it. She's had a spiritual experience. No, folks, not at all. It's simply explaining and pointing out to everyone that that's what it is. And and if the people haven't had it, a lot of our listeners, Jacqui, haven't had a spiritual experience. I know that. Some have had the odd one here or there, so they've got some understanding. But when you hear someone and see someone that is actually having one before your very eyes, it has a very powerful impact on the person. And that's happened over 30 years of when I've been teaching in various groups, where people have aha moments during the session, just like you did last week. And all the others, they're all thinking, "Oh, I wish it was me," or "I'd like to have it," or that. But it's none of that's relevant. It's just there's an example, and it's an encouragement for everyone that's listening to us, an encouragement to them that keep persevering. And they're the sort of things that'll keep happening as the years go by. It's not doesn't all happen in one go. It's a gradual process, as I keep saying, step by step. All right, Jacqui.
Yeah, beautiful.
All right, we'll finish with you. Just sit there and be quiet for a while now.
Lucky you've got plenty of words to share.
No, you'll get plenty of chances. All right, so before we begin chapter 7, folk, I'd like to refer to another Gita, Jacqui, that I feel would be very useful for anyone to buy and to read. You made a reference in earlier podcasts, particularly to Jack Hawley's book, A Walk Through for Westerners, which is a very, very simple book. And I agree that was a beautiful book for anyone to buy. For those that are getting keener or a little bit more advanced, you need more than that. That's only a sort of similar to my podcasts, a brief sort of overview. So I'm recommending, for those who want to write it down, I'll go slowly, a book by a spiritual teacher called Eknath Easwaran, Eknath, Eknath Easwaran, Easwaran. And he's written a Gita, brilliant piece of work. It's called the Bhagavad Gita for Daily Living. So even if you just type that up, I'm sure it'll come up. Eknath presents his Gita as a 3-volume set. It's in plain English, very simple to read, and he uses many stories to illustrate the points that are being made that don't come across in the more detail, more sort of scholastic books, if you like. So in that regard, it's a very, very useful book. I've found it useful. A lot of my students over the years have found it useful as well. And I'll be holding these up in a few minutes and referring to them separately, and I'll explain that when we get there. I mentioned in my first podcast on the background to the Gita that its 18 chapters are divided into 3 groups of 6 chapters. These are his 3 books, each containing 6 chapters. So I'm going to hold those up now, Jacqui. So firstly, there's the 3 of them together, all right? And I'll do them separately for the listeners and the watchers. So the book we finished, the work we've done so far is what's called Volume 1. That's Volume 1 there.
And just hold it back a little further away from the screen. Yep.
Bhagavad Gita. And its title mightn't be easy to see, but it says The End of Sorrow. The End of Sorrow. And then there's so that does 6 chapters, and we've just finished 6 chapters. So that's why I'm sort of going to a bit of, spending a bit of time showing this. The next one's Volume 2. They've all got the same cover. And it's called, I'll get to that because I'll be dealing with that, but that's got the next 6 chapters. That's the 6 chapters that we're all going to be covering now over the coming weeks, coming podcasts. And then there's Volume 3, which brings those first 2 volumes together, because one's on us, one's on God, and one's on us and merging with God. So that's the 3 volumes, Jacqui. So I'll just go back to Volume 1. I've jotted down a few things because I think it's important, listeners, to separate them so that you get a clear understanding, as clear as we can make it, as to what we've done, and that's the 14 podcasts to date, and what we're going to do in the next 6 chapters in our podcasts. All right, Jacqui? So that volume 1's titled, as I said, The End of Sorrow, which concentrates on the individual human being. The preceding 14 podcasts we've studied have now concluded all of that book, volume 1. So it's obviously you can see how thick the book is. Well, we've done it in 14 podcasts. So that's why I keep saying it's a very broad stroke approach that I'm taking in presenting these podcasts. The preceding 14 podcasts we've studied, they concluded volume 1. Here we reflected on some sorrow or unease in our lives. That's why his title is The End of Sorrow. Because when the individual wakes up and starts on their spiritual journey, well, that's starting to end all the sorrows and the miseries and the upsets and the angst and all of the turbulent aspects we've had in our life, not just this life, but in many lives. So the only way we can end that sorrow is through new knowledge and a bit of the other things I'll just briefly touch on that revises what we've done in volume 1. So here we reflected on some sorrow and unease in our lives, and courageously we decided we wanted to make some changes in the way we thought, spoke and acted. And we embarked on, or more strongly continued on, our spiritual journey. So some of our listeners, Jacqui's, are just tuning into it for the first time. Others have done a fair bit of work in different areas and on podcasts and books they've read. So it doesn't matter. These podcasts cover anyone as long as they're woke enough and have got an interest in the truth. All right. Along the way, in those 14 podcasts, we've gained some new knowledge. We've learned about selfless action, which led to renunciation or letting go. By this process, we became wiser. There was a chapter on some podcasts on wisdom, which prepared us for the stillness of meditation, which now leads us into volume 2, titled Like a Thousand Suns. So that takes us into volume 2 now. So this is where I'll finish now with volume 1 and what we've done in 14 podcasts, and the rest of the session will be dealing with this. In the very first page of his book, even before you get to anything, he's just got a little quote there. Yeah. And it's a sloka from the Gita in chapter 11, verse 12, sloka 12. And this reference to like a thousand suns. So we've all, Jacqui, I'm sure, one way or another, had to drive in at sunrise when the sun's shining on a bright day, no clouds, everything. And as it's coming up, the glare's too much for our eyes, isn't it? Sunglasses, sun visor down, squinting still even in through that. And he uses that analogy, this light of a sun, to put it this way. And this is describing consciousness, the brightness, the light of consciousness. He says, if 1,000 suns were to rise at the same time, the blaze of their light would resemble a little supreme splendour of the Lord. So if you could imagine 1,000 suns, not just the one sun that we're talking about, 1,000 of them rising simultaneously, and trying to look at that, that would just be a tiny speck, not even like a pinhead of the light of consciousness. And I'll be touching on that all through these next, or we'll be touching on that all through these next 6 chapters. I'll read it just again quickly. If 1,000 suns were to rise at the same time, the blaze of their light would resemble a little the supreme splendour of the Lord. Beautiful?
It's very beautiful.
So that's the title of that, and that gives us an idea of a real little gem there of what these next 6 chapters are all about, all elaborating and extending that sort of concept. And we'll be involved in that as individual human beings. It's not just solely about the Lord. On numerous occasions in our podcasts, I've frequently made reference to the egoic lower self and to the divine higher self. So when we've been talking about a lot in those 6 chapters, Jacqui, we're mainly focusing on the lower self, but I make references and say, well, we've got 2 selves, a lower self and a higher self. And they were the 2 people I said should be in the room when they're meditating for meditation, the 2 people, your lower self and your higher self. And the experience you had was a very strong connection between the two. So the next 6 chapters of the Gita we're now going to study focus on this divine self. So I've only briefly mentioned it by just saying the higher self. We're going to look at what that higher self is in very, very fine detail, minute detail. And I read the little quote there that just gives us a snippet of an idea. And finally, volume 3, which is this one. Doesn't matter which one I hold up, but that's the one it is. The title to that is "To Love is to Know Me." So the love there meaning in spiritual sort of teachings is often referred to as the yoga of devotion, the path of devotion. So there's the path of action, the path of knowledge, and the path of devotion. All 3 paths have to be absorbed or used by a seeker of truth. You can't just get there on 1 leg or on 2 legs. You've got to get there on 3 legs. It's like 3 streams, 3 rivers merging together in one mighty river. They all complement each other, supplement each other, reinforce each other. All right. And so that love there that's referred to is to know me is there has to end up in that last 6 chapters very, very stronger devotion in the individual human to be able to connect with that higher self. So you need the knowledge, you need the practical application, the rightful actions, but you also then need to top it up very strongly with that devotional aspect. Yeah, and that's different to religious sense of going to a church once a week and praying and things like that. They're all useful. I'm not knocking any of that or anything, but that's not what we understand or what I understand and present in these podcasts as to a spiritual approach to all of this. Okay, Jackie?
Mm-hmm.
In
Just on a quick administrative note, just to point out, I think there's probably a few editions of those series because I've got those 3 books and they look quite different actually, very different color tones and things like that. So if any of you are looking it up, there's lots of editions, lots of covers, but yeah, very beautiful, accessible words with householder examples, everyday examples of the way this sort of philosophy can be incorporated into everyday life. I think most people will find it very accessible and encouraging.
Good, Jackie. And that's, most people I think would recognise that buy books or read books that every so often there's a new edition and a new cover and so on. So even when I hold up later on, I'll be making a reference to, hopefully I'll make some reference to Jack Hawley's work. My book's totally different to yours, the cover, but the contents are all the same. So finally, volume 3, titled To Love is to Know Me, which combines volumes 1 and 2 to bring about the final unity of the lower mortal self with the higher immortal self, which is referred to as self-realization or enlightenment. So again, for those who are a bit more familiar with those terms and a bit more strongly focused, that is the end goal of all of this teaching. So along the way, we start off as beginners and we just learn little bits here and there and help make our lives, improve our lives, the quality of our lives and those all around us. But eventually that devotion to the Lord gets stronger and stronger and the focus becomes more on that aspect of self-realization. But that's the long-term goal, folks. If it's not on your radar at the moment, don't get frightened, don't be worried. It'll all just evolve of its own accord. I can't do anything about it. Jackie can't do anything about it. Your mum and dad can't do anything about it. It's all in your hands. Yeah.
And just another way, sorry to interject there, but just another way I often like to think about it, and a way that possibly can be a little easier to relate to in those early stages, is just that it's this path of fully opening to our incredible potential. Like even on that level, just this notion that every day we can improve and explore and grow and expand and evolve. Like we've all come with particular skill sets, we've all come to unfold in particular ways, even just to sort of brighten our own light, brighten our own bravery and courage and capacity to be in the world in a very authentic, aligned, centered way. Because sometimes just having something tangible that someone can grasp onto in terms of their own immediate life and what's in front of them can be enough of a growth step and a motivation. So whether it's that long-term sort of notion of self-realization, which could potentially, depending on people's learning journey, sound a little far away. This beautiful unfolding journey that we've got, I mean, that's big enough, and it'll keep us on the path. It'll move us in that direction.
Yeah, beautifully put, Jackie. That's exactly it. That I love, when you use the word potential. Inside every human being, all 8 billion people on the planet, most of who have got no idea of this, not in the least bit interested, they're fully absorbed in the world. They've got a seed inside that's waiting to germinate to discover their true nature, the potentiality that lies within every human being. People listening to these podcasts and interested in this work, even if you're not listening, but other podcasts and so on, but I'm talking obviously the ones that are connecting with us, they're unlocking that potential. It's like it's all locked up. You've got a huge amount of wealth in a safe or something, but you've lost the key, and you could be lying there, starving to death because you can't buy food. If you got the key and unlocked it, well, then the wealth's there. Well, the wealth we're talking about here is not financial wealth as we understand it, money and gold and so on. It's spiritual wealth. And eventually, every human being, and I'll touch on that later on, will be seeking that. Just some haven't woken up yet. And that's not either good or bad or right or wrong. It's just what it is. It's all part of the divine plan. My interest in these podcasts is to be of whatever assistance I can be to the people who have at least put the key in the door, and they either opened it or wanting to open it, or have already opened it to some extent or other. So that's you folks listening. That's who I'm talking about. You're brave and you're courageous, and I love you. And I encourage you to just keep on your journey, step by step, and it'll all unfold. All right, Jackie.
Beautiful.
So halfway into the session, I'll start on chapter 7.
Don't put too much pressure on yourself. I know the school teacher in you comes out and you love to get through the class plan or the session plan, but I think there's so much value in the unscripted back and forth. There's so much value in breaking this down into realness, like real tangible ideas and concepts and little gems of wisdom that people can take hold of. So keep in mind there's value in all of this, whether we get through your many pages of prepared notes or not.
You sort of sound like you're getting close to the top of my fan club, Jackie. That's yeah. I'm not worried. I'm just sort of saying, that we are supposed to be looking at the Gita, and we have, as you say, in different ways. But what we're really doing in this podcast and next is chapter 7. So I'm just making the point that we're actually starting chapter 7.
I'm just having a giggle at our personality differences and our approaches. I know, and people are probably picking up you love to plan, which is beautiful. You're a fantastic planner, and thank goodness, because it's giving these this podcast series a lot of value and chunkiness. There's an inherent thought that's gone into it, which is immediately recognizable. I suppose I could be a little bit different in that I don't mind going off in different ways, and we tend to, I think we're complementing each other very, very beautifully. But I'm just giggling because I know you like to stick to your plan, and I'm quite happy to deviate. But anyway, between the two of us, I think there's a lovely balance coming across. So I'll be quiet and you move on with your material.
We touch on this nearly every week, Jackie.
Yeah, we do.
And I keep agreeing with you. It is a good combination. But even you, say the example you're giving there, that's what I used to do in philosophy cafes. We just brought up, I'd start a topic, someone would make a comment, someone would agree, someone would disagree, and we just branch it out. One thing would lead to another. But once you become like groups I take now, for example, like study groups, so we become more focused. And the reason you asked me to do these podcasts, Jackie, is because I sensed at the very start that you've gained a lot of knowledge in like a jigsaw puzzle, a bit of this and a bit of this and a bit of that, which that's how people sort of come. But eventually there's an awareness that those pieces need to come together. It's not just this piece and that piece and that piece, like a jigsaw. Until they're all put together, you don't get the full picture, do you? And so my sort of take on that is that eventually all those people who are probably listening have got a bit here and a bit there from this podcast, from that podcast, refers to this topic on and a treat there and all that. But it still hasn't all tied it all together. So the idea of something like the Gita is that ties it all together, as I've just said, volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. That's all structured. But I understand fully what you're saying, and I don't want to be too rigid or anything.
No, continue on.
Okay, so the chapter's titled, all the Gitas have different ways of putting titles in, but I've picked two out, and they both got the same sort of words, if you like, but just the way they're put differently. So the Yoga of Knowledge and Realization is one title, and the next title that I've got is the Yoga of Knowing and Experiencing Divinity. So can you see, Jacqui, that realization and experiencing divinity are the same thing? And one says knowledge of realization, and the other one says knowing and experiencing divinity. And I'll elaborate on that in about two minutes' time. So I'm just stressing it here as part of the title to this chapter. There used to be a song many years ago when I was growing up. We used to have what's called hit parades, and I wonder how many people listening have ever heard of a hit parade. But anyway,
there's modern day equivalents.
One song that even before I started on this appealed to me, and I didn't know why then, but I certainly know now, because there was already the seed that I was talking about sprouting within me. But the song, don't know what it was titled, but it might have even been this. But the words I remember is, to know him is to love him. Right, or the other way around, I think. To love him is to know him. Well, that's that volume 3. Yeah, I love the love. So, but you got to know him first. So what we're doing in these podcasts is the knowing, the intellectual side, and then that's got to transfer to the realization. You can't have that experience that you did last week just because you've studied meditation and been on meditation retreats, and then I spoke about meditation last week. No, the realization part came when it was all that accumulated knowledge finally connected in that few seconds and resonated with you and became true knowing. Is that clear?
Well, that's clear. To be honest, I might kind of disagree with you on that point a little bit, but
Yes.
I do understand what you're saying. I mean, to bring in a personal experience, I just think I remember, well, actually, many of my first few early true spiritual experiences were when I was either a teenager or in my very early 20s, like before the age of 25. And actually, I didn't have a lot of accumulated knowledge. And when I look back now with the learnings that I have gained over the past 30 years or so, I actually have a comprehension for what happened in those times. But sometimes I just found myself in a fortuitous environment with skilled teachers that crafted or held a very beautiful space. I feel almost like it was a beautiful divine gift that I had these spiritual kind of wake up moments, but I actually had no context for them. I had no mental idea really what was taking place. I hadn't really gathered a lot of knowledge at that point. So I'm not sure if, I think we're talking about the same sort of thing. I'm sometimes wondering if actually we can be gifted these experiences, and this sort of example is maybe a reminder that things aren't always so linear. I know they come across so beautifully in the books that they appear almost in a linear fashion, but I sometimes wonder if actually things can unravel a little bit, almost like a ball of wool, and that to have some consistency of learning and knowledge is immensely useful, but that we can have those little wake up moments or moments of truth and consciousness and alignment along the way. It's not always in order, I suppose, is maybe one of the main points I'm trying to make.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying there is very valid. But you said you're going to sort of disagree with me in a little bit way, and it's not really a disagreement. It's really some lack of understanding. And what you're describing there, Jacqui, is a very valid point, and it's useful for everyone as well. And when I just said that reference, I heard this song, but I wasn't studying philosophy or anything, but it resonated with me. and you're using words like fortuitous and being lucky that you went on a retreat and stuff like that. Well, in this teaching, you, Jacqui, and the listeners, there's no such thing as good luck or bad luck or fortuitous or anything like that. And you said you thought it was like gifted to you. Well, all those things are right, but they're not quite finely tuned enough. So you need to take into account the cycles of birth and death and karma. And so the reason you had some of those experiences very early in your life before you'd studied this and whatever is easily explained through an understanding of life cycles and re-embodiments. So what's obvious to me instantly as you're saying all of that is that in the previous lifetime and the one before that and even the one before that, it's not just in one lifetime, you've accumulated some of this knowledge. And early in this lifetime, because your desire for the truth has been strong for a number of lifetimes now, it builds on everything that you've already learned. So you don't start each lifetime starting off on a blank sheet. If you've got half of your jigsaw puzzle completed, or 3/4 or a quarter, that's where you come in, and you just keep adding to it. But in early stages, like you're describing there, and I've experienced that as well. Everyone's experienced it. That's a natural part of it. But there's just confusion because if you understand, you'll come to understand karma more. And how it works is that fortuitous moment that you referred to was a gift that you gave yourself in previous lifetimes to bring in to this lifetime. Is that making sense, Jacqui? Is that
It is.
helping you understand?
It reminds me that we forget, don't we? We
Yeah.
forget so many things. We don't just forget the last life and the one before that. We forget in this life.
Yeah.
Because actually, like the notion of karmic implications in life and death, I've got a reasonable awareness of to a large degree, but we forget. We're often looking for the milestones or the learning path in this life from birth onwards. So I think it's good for me, probably for all of us, to have that reminder.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to maybe help you understand a bit more clearly that's what's happened to you. Same with this episode last week. That has come about through not only this lifetime doing meditation, but the references you made that you remember some of this. Now, just to clear that up quickly for everyone, we're not meant to remember all our past lifetimes. In the teachings, God will say to Arjuna, "I'll remember all your past lifetimes. You don't." Yeah, God knows and remembers everything. It's the big architect of it all. What we do need to know is how karma works. And then just that gives us an understanding that if these episodes happen in our lives, when we get the more understanding of karma, it all makes sense. And I'll just quickly share a similar sort of experience. When I was about 15 or 16, on this hit parade again that I was talking about, they used to play Amazing Grace as one of the pop tunes in amongst rock and roll and blue suede shoes and all the rest of it. Anyway, I didn't like blue suede shoes and all that sort of stuff, but I liked Amazing Grace. And two lines stuck out for me, Jacqui. I don't know if I've mentioned this in the previous podcast, but they were, once I was blind, but now I see. Once I was deaf, but now I hear. And they just didn't make sense, but I loved them. They just sort of, So that what you just explained was exactly the same. There was the resonance there within me. And I did a radio interview with a chappie one day, and we did it on Amazing Grace. It was beautiful. We played some music, and the people in the foyer I could see through the glass. Singo in progress, they're all out there chatting, about 10, 15 people, animated, all the rest of it. We got headphones on like here and talking in the microphone, and we decided we'd play, Amazing Grace. So we just played that for the listeners to sort of set the tone and the mood. As the music was also playing out into the foyer, and every person just stopped mid-sentence, just stopped. And all listening. It had a powerful effect on the people. Well, that's what it had on me. And the bloke said, I said, but in the interview, I said, I was only 15 or so, and I said, it took another 30 years before I came to understand what those words meant and why they appealed to me. And he asked, why did it take 30 years? And I said, well, I did things that most humans do. I found a wife and we had children and we built a house and we had a career and had friends and we played sport and we did all of those things. And so I was busy. I didn't have time for the truth. I didn't even know what the truth was. But when my awakening moment came, which I have described briefly, I think, it was all that memory floods back. All that memory floods back. And I knew exactly why I loved, once I was blind, but now I see. Yeah, blind to the truth, blind to the divine aspect in me and in every human being and throughout the creation, and that you need the truth to come to understand all of that. Yeah, I just, I'm sure that this little discussion we're having is pretty much cleared up why there was that bit of confusion, and yeah, you mentioned we forget even in this lifetime. Well, of course we forget last lifetime and last time because they're not really part of the agenda, and we're not even meant to remember. But we certainly need to understand that these things have happened, and we can relate to what's happening in our life. That the work was done previously. So you were pretty much thinking that it came from an outside source, or you were specially gifted to you or something. I'm saying no, 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 definitely no, not to you, not to anyone. It's all earned. It's all earned. You've earned it in previous lifetimes, and that's why you had a memory of it, or an instant resonance. That resonance I often talk about was there at that point. All right, Jacqui.
Beautiful. I'm going to let you return to your material.
Otherwise, I'll just become a shaking mess. All good, all good. So this chapter and the 5 following are all in various ways extolling the qualities of the divine being, also known as, and I mentioned before, don't get hooked up on a special word. You can call it the absolute, you can call it consciousness, you can call it God, you can call it Brahman, you can call it the supreme reality, many ways of it being referred to. Even in the Gita, he switches from God to Brahman to Lord Brahman, all the rest of it. Don't get frightened by any of that, folks. It's the higher self. And whatever, if you've got another name that I haven't listed there, that's okay. As long as you understand that that's the highest aspect that you're aware of. It needs to be understood, because that's where all the source for the whole creation comes from, and so on. All right. Krishna states, this is now the very first verse in chapter 7. Now, let me be very clear, Arjuna. It may seem impossible to you, but a mere human can indeed come to know God. Yeah, a mere human. That's us. We think we're mere humans. Yeah, well, we are on one level, but on another level, we're an immortal being. Yeah, that's the two aspects. And this is where all our work is. People very, very frequently said to me in classes and so on, in discussions, oh, I like the sound of realization. I'd love to become realized, well, but I can't achieve it in this lifetime. Yeah. So they've already, in a sense, denied it to themselves. You're saying I can't achieve it. Well, listeners, anyone, in the teaching it says self-realization is imminent. Yeah? Here and now, right now. But the person's got to be worthy of it. They've had to do the groundwork and the preparation. I've said a few times, God doesn't wave a wand. Pixie fairies don't come and wave magic dust on you or something. Everything you've learned, and everything you've earned, and everything that's making your life happier, and all aspects of truth, if you look at it closely, you'll have instigated it all. You're the one that says, I'm going to read this book or listen to this podcast. You're the one that says, I'm going to go on this retreat. You're the one that says, I'm going to meditate, or says, no, I'm not going to meditate. So it's in each individual's hands. And the further we get down the track, the easier it is, because we're more strongly self-driven, self-motivated. We know clearly where we're going, why we're going, and what we need to get there. But in the early days, it's not quite so simple, right? But nevertheless, everyone's got to adjust, and everyone's got to get to that stage of being self-motivated and self-propelled. And that won't come until people have got a lot of other desires out of the way. Marriage, babies, wealth, fame, whatever it might be. While they're predominant, well, that's what people will put their energy and time and focus into. When they tire of that, and they will eventually, even if it's 1,000 lifetimes, there'll be a yearning inside for that seed that I've talked about that wants to germinate. All right, Jacqui?
Mhm.
And he goes on to say in the very first verse, listen, O Arjuna, and I will tell thee how thou shalt know me and my full perfection. So in other words, he's saying right here that over the next 6 chapters, I'm going to be talking about myself. I'm going to be telling you my qualities, my power, what I do, how I bring the whole creation about, how I sustain it, all of these sort of aspects. And he goes on, he says, listen, Arjuna, and this is what you need to do. You're going to need to meditate on me. You've got to love me. You've got to devote your whole mind to me, and you've got to have me as your refuge. So you know that's home. That's who you truly are. Yeah, God, Brahman. Krishna is a personification, just like Jesus was a personification of the God. And he says, he goes on to tell him that to be able to do this, he needs both. Yeah, both. 2 things. He says you need the knowledge of the divinity. That's the title to the chapter, the knowledge, the knowing. Achieved through limited thinking mind. So this is one of the great paradoxes, Jacqui and listeners, that we use our limited self, our thinking mind, our emotions, our ego, our 5 senses and our body. They're our tools, if you like, so we connect with the higher self. You've got to use the mortal to discover the immortal. And that's the plan. That's how it works. So we need to use this mind. But instead of thinking this and that, we're going to think God. We're going to think Brahman. And he says, and so this is what we're doing now. We're learning it or knowing it at an intellectual level. That's right, Jack, isn't it? Listening to podcasts, reading books, going on retreats, that's all at intellectual level. It's essential. Everyone has to do that. But he says that's one of the aspects. Then the other aspect you need is the wisdom of divinity. That's the realization. So again, going back to your episode last week, you had the knowledge of it. You'd accumulated all of that, and you'd had that strong background, as you were saying, when you made reference just a few minutes ago. But it still hadn't quite clicked in together. And but in that moment, it all combined, and you had that beautiful moment. So that's exactly what's being referred to here. So that's the wisdom of divinity, which is achieved through insight. That's through the third eye, through intuition, bypassing the thinking mind. That's limited. Intuition's up here. It's often referred to as the third eye, represented by the dot that you see on gurus' foreheads and so on. That's what's called the Buddhi mind, the all-knowing mind, the mind of God. Yeah. It's pure, it's untarnished, and it's always correct. But very few people know about it, and even the ones who know about it, it's still difficult to keep remembering to connect with that and not get caught up with ego telling you, no, just use your ordinary mind. That's what you need on this occasion. So, so this divine wisdom, or the wisdom of divinity, is what's called realization. That's when the being realizes what they've actually learned and studied and talked about and so on. Okay, Jacqui, do you think anyone listening is going to understand what I'm saying? Of course they are.
It's all accumulative,
Yep.
little bit by little bit by little bit.
Okay. So it goes on to say that once these 2 are accomplished, there remains nothing else worth having in this life. So that's the whole purpose of life, folks, to change our self. It's like often the analogy is used, the caterpillar, when it's time for it to change into a butterfly, a beautiful butterfly, it pupates, spins a cocoon, spends some time in there, and then eats its way out, and it's a beautiful, bright butterfly. Well, and it's free, it can fly. That's exactly the analogy for human beings. Most of our lifetime, many lifetimes, we're like a grub, a caterpillar, just crawling around doing what it is we think attracts our attention. Eventually we wake up, so we go into this stage, and that could be over many lifetimes, where we learn, like you were saying, like we're saying with your example with the meditation, from one lifetime to the next lifetime, and you just said it builds on, it's a gradual building on process. That's exactly what it has. So where everyone on this planet, and particularly is either a grub or in a state of pupation, changing. Most people are grubs. I'm not saying that derogatory, just using the analogy of the caterpillar. I'll use caterpillar, that sounds softer. Most people are caterpillars. They've got the potential to become a beautiful butterfly and fly freely, but they're limited to slow movement and slow thinking and all the rest of it because they're a caterpillar. When they wake up, when people, all of us, we've done that, we're woken up and we're in a cocoon. And so we're bringing about this change, this metamorphosis. And eventually the realization aspect is flying free. In our brightest colors, our true, what's called our true garb, shining brightly and flying free. All right, Jacqui. Well, I think we're and he just says on that last line, oh, I didn't read that one. No, leave that. So yeah, just the last point I want to finish off on. We've got a few minutes over. I got a bit excited there and lost track of looking at my watch. Questioner then goes to explain to Arjuna that this is not easy by saying, among thousands of men, scarcely one strives for perfection, for God knowledge. And of these, scarce one knows me in true essence. So that's in the Gita. That's the sloka. He's saying, he understands that among thousands of men, only very few people are going to choose to do what we're all doing. Doesn't make us good or bad or rich or poor or anything, famous or unfamous. We're just different because we're seeking truth and most people aren't. But he says a rare one among the deluded masses emerges to strive for spiritual enlightenment. So that's people like us, Jacqui, and the listeners. We're shifted. It's like moving away from the herd or from the flock of sheep or the herd of cows. There's that herd mentality. While you're in that herd mentality, folk, you're in prison of your own making. You're just following the leader, whoever it is at the time that takes your fancy, doing what they say and what they suggest, all the rest of it. You're slaves. You're slaves when you're doing all of that. If you want to break free, you want to truly be free, you need knowledge and you need to put it into practice, which is what we've all been doing. So I'll just two more lines, Jacqui. Despite these odds, it's in the interest of God that all beings will, in the following fullness of time, reach this degree of perfection. So this seed, this desire for liberation is in there, and even if it takes another 500,000 lifetimes, 2,000 lifetimes for an individual, they'll all end up start doing what we're doing now, and will follow through. And there's a similar aspect to that in the Christian teachings, where there's the reference that God the Father wants all his children to return home. That's how it's presented in the Christian teaching. And the story that's used is the story of the prodigal son returning back home to the father. So in that sense, all the people on the planet are prodigal sons and daughters, all children of God, and he wants us all to come back to him, and we all eventually want to go back to him. And that's how the process is viewed in both the Eastern spiritual philosophy and in the Western spiritual philosophy. So this is what we're all doing here in these podcasts, folks. The majority of humans totally lack interest in self-development, chasing the enchantments of the world for instant gratification. As seekers of truth, we should derive a great deal of satisfaction and encouragement from this verse. So I'm leaving it there, Jacqui, on I think a positive note. Yeah. We're pupating and we're getting much, much closer now to becoming this beautiful butterfly wanting to fly free. And listeners, Jacqui, don't take my word for it. I'm asking you to ask yourself, Do you feel that that's what you're doing? And if you do, well, you'll continue on next week and listen to me again. All right, Jacqui.
Beautiful. That's a nice way to wrap up.
I'm just going to give the exercise. So on that last point, I'm asking you to observe, folk, for your exercise this week. And I've got not judge, because these days you're not allowed to judge and this and that, and so no, don't judge. Jesus says you shall judge them by their actions, how people talk, how they act. But you're not judging them; they're showing you. That's what it really means. So I want you to observe, not to judge, just observe. How many of your family, friends, work colleagues, people you've ever met, people you know, anywhere, people you see on the news, people you read about, people you see on these shows, I Wonder Wife or something like that. How many of can you, without no judgment, just using your higher vision, your third eye, your intuitive knowledge, do you know that on the spiritual journey, seeking truth? And I've written at the end, probably be quite surprised when you have a close look at it. All right, that's your homework, your exercise, folks. Lovely chatting to you all. Lovely chatting to you, Jacqui. Another good session, I feel.
Lovely. I agree.
So I'm over and out.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, everybody. No, I've got no extra comments. We will pick it up next week and run with the rest of chapter 7.
Yep.
All right. Have a lovely week, everybody.
Yes, from me too. Bye.
Bye.